Alright, we're going to talk about rounding today. So rounding is basically the idea of changing a number so it is closer to a specific round number. When I say round number, I mean something like 10 or 100 or 1,000, the closest it is to that. Instead of something like 2,312, you might round it to 2,300 because it's a rounder number. I'm not really sure how to explain that any better than that. The way that we do this involves a specific number, and the number is the number 5. Number 5 is halfway between 0 and 10, and this is significant in a base 10 system. 5 is always a halfway mark in a base 10 system. So if, for instance, I want to put 4, and I want to round it to the nearest 10, if I count in tens and I start at 0, I go 0, 10, 20, 30, so on. Well, 4 is right between 0 and 10, so it's either going to be rounded down to the 0, so it'll either be rounded down to the 0, or it'll be rounded up to the 10. It depends on where it is. Now 4, as we know, falls right here on the number line. So it is before the 5, it's before the halfway mark. So in terms of which 10 it's closest to, it's actually closest to the 0, right? If I were to do something like 7, well, 7 would fit right, about here. And that would then be closer to the 10. So that 7 would be closer to this 10. So the 4, if I'm rounding to the nearest 10, the 4 would round to 0, the 7 would round to 10. The 5 is the halfway mark. So usually the rule is this. If it is 5 or more, it goes up. If it is less than 5, then it goes down. Now I'll show you a couple more examples here. If we've got the number 16, and I want to round to the nearest 10, number 16 is on the number line, it's going to be about there. So it's more than halfway. So it's closer to 20. So 16 rounded to the nearest 10, it wouldn't round down to 10, it'd round up to 20. Okay, now it doesn't have to be tens, it can be anything. Let's say I'm rounding to the nearest 100. Okay, so my 100, I've got 100, then I've got 200. My number is 175. 175 is somewhere here. So of the hundreds, if I'm counting in hundreds, 175 is closest to 200. So 175 rounded to the nearest 100 would round it up to 200. So if I'm looking in thousands, let's say I want to round to the nearest 1,000, and I've got the number 3,397. Well, that falls between the 3,000s and the 4,000s, and halfway would be 3,500. So it'll either go down to 3,000, or it'll go up to 4,000. Well, where does it fit on the number line? Well, it fits somewhere in here, okay? It's less than 3,500, it's less than halfway, so it rounds down to 3,000. So that's the idea of rounding, how it works. If you're rounding in hundreds, you'd count in hundreds and round to the nearest one of those. If you're rounding in thousands, again, you count in thousands and round to the nearest one of those. Now, we don't want to have to draw a number line every time, and so there is a shortcut way of doing this. So, I guess I've got to do one more of these. So 451 rounded to the nearest 10. Well, if I'm counting in tens, I'll count in 440, 450, 460, 470. That's tens. I'm counting in tens. Well, the one that's closest to 451, it's somewhere between 450, it's more than that, and it's less than 460. So it's either going to be rounded down to 450 or up to 460. Halfway is 455. Well, 451 is right next to 450. So again, that one will round down to 450. Okay, so what I was alluding to earlier, this is the shortcut method. You underline the digit that you want to round to. So if you're rounding to the tens, you'll underline the tens digit. If you're rounding to the hundreds, you'll underline the hundreds digit. Then you look to the right of that digit. If the number to the right is 5 or more, then it goes up. Your underlined digit will go up. So that's what that arrow is showing. If your digit to the right is less than 5, then your underlying digit will stay the same. It'll never go down. You say you're underlining something and you underline a 2. You're never going to put it down to 1. It'll either stay as a 2 or it'll go up to a 3. So let's take a look at an example. So if I've got 62,725 and I'm rounding to the thousands place, see this digit underlined is the thousands place. Well, that digit is either going to stay at 2 or it's going to go up to 3. It's never going to go down to 1. If we round down, it stays at 2, right? If we round up, it moves to 3. So we have to look to the next digit, look to the right, and this digit here is a 7. So according to the rule here, if we look to the right, if it's 5 or more, then the underlying digit goes up. Well, it's a 7. So that underlying digit is going to go up. So that 2 will become a 3. If that was less than 5, that 2 would stay the same. Now the rules are, if you look underneath, everything to the right turns to 0. So that 7 turns to 0, that 2 turns to 0, that 5 turns to 0. And everything to the left stays the same. So that 6 stays the same. So if we're rounding to the nearest thousand, if I'm counting in thousands, 62,000, 63,000, well, 62,725 is closer to 63,000. Here's one, 69,782. This sometimes happens. If I look to the right here, my digit again is a 7. That means that my 9 is going to go up. Well, what's it going to go up to? 10? You can't just write a 10 in here. I can't just write 10. So we'll have to use logic here. So instead of 69, it'll move up to 70, right? And then everything to the right turns to 0. So sometimes that will happen. If you're rounding a 9 and you have to round it up, then you've got to round up the next digit as well, just to make it work. So that's essentially how it works. Remember, it doesn't really matter what the number is. You can pick any number. Let's say I have 375,126, and I'm going to round to the nearest 100. Well, I look to the right, and that's a 2. So in this case, that 1 is not going to go up. It's going to stay the same. It's not going to go down. It's not going to turn into a 0. Everything to the right will turn to 0, however, and everything to the left will stay the same. So 375,126 rounded to the nearest 100 is 375,100.